And I'm now joined in the studio by Monika Stärk, the Executive Director of the German Asia-Pacific Business Association. What do you make of this huge mega bailout in terms of will it keep the euro stable?
Well, hopefully, from my point of view, from our point of view, this is especially a very strong message we are sending to the world in Asia, that Europe is able to tackle the problems, is able to take bold and decisive measures, and even to be quite flexible on principles we thought would be, well, unattackable some years before. And I think this is very much what Asia expects us to do.
And how will this bailout package affect Asia? Will it have any effect there?
Well, it will create a positive awareness of Europe. Europe is still on the screen. Europe is still a reliable partner. That's the important message.
So it makes Europe look stronger from the Asian point of view, or did we show some weakness that wasn't expected that way?
Well, of course, Europe has shown some weakness which we wouldn't have expected to see some 5 years ago. But we see that the world and political weight has changed considerably in these past years. So it's quite normal that we show weaknesses which may be comparable to the problems Asian markets had to tackle some 10 years ago. We are not absolutely different. We are living in the same world.
Okay. Monika Stärk, thank you for the moment. We'll pick your brains about Asia in particular later in the program. But before we turn our back on Europe, let's take stock of the situation here. Greece isn't the only EU country that needs to get its house in order. The International Monetary Fund made it clear that every Eurozone member has to tighten its belt to keep those huge mountains of debt under control. In cooperation with Germany's leading financial daily Handelsblatt, we wanted to find out how Germany would be affected if it had to implement austerity measures similar to those in Greece. Let's have a look.
Berlin finance professor Jörg Rocholl took the situation in Greece and extrapolated what it would mean if it were happening in Germany. The same level of cuts as Greece is making would require Germany to save 62 billion euros every year.
If you have to reduce the budget annually by 62 billion, 2/3 could be made from spending cuts and the rest could come from increased revenue. So 40 billion less in spending and about 20 billion in additional revenue.
Where would it come from? First, the additional revenue. How can a government raise money? One method is to raise the value-added tax. A hike of 2%, which is what's been implemented in Greece, would bring in about 14 billion euros in Germany. But it would make consumer spending more expensive as well. For the average household, it would mean about 34 euros more a month.
Shopping is already kind of expensive, and if the value-added tax were raised, I'd have to consider even more carefully which things I'd buy.
Most consumers would probably accept a 2% increase. An additional 14 billion euros in revenue would flow into state coffers.
But you have to keep in mind that when value-added tax is too high, it would weaken domestic purchasing power. And a weakening of purchasing power means that less overall could be purchased. So that in the end, tax revenue actually goes down and the shadow economy grows larger. And illegal work would increase, for example.
Another source of state revenue? Income taxes. Wages could be taxed more heavily. An increase of 3% would pull in an additional 6 billion euros.
Another important aspect, though, is that what's really owed the state needs to be actually paid. Tax evasion is a major factor. It has caused significant problems in Greece right now. Officially in Greece, only about 5,000 taxpayers declare annual income of more than 100,000 euros.
In Germany, Rocholl says most upper-income earners pay high tax rates, but that wouldn't be enough to help out in a massive austerity program. In addition to revenue, the financial analyst also took a look at possible spending cuts. The government would need to save 40 billion euros. One item on the cut list might be Germany's autobahns. Potential savings from stopping construction and maintenance 13 billion euros.
Cuts in spending on infrastructure are always painful. Infrastructure is the prerequisite for economic growth and for the ability to collect future tax revenue.
Major cuts could also be made in the German Defense Ministry. 16 billion euros could be saved by cutting the military budget in half. Slashing spending on the Autobahns and the Bundeswehr would be painful, but would total savings of about 29 billion euros. And despite the unpopularity of cuts in social spending, as in Greece, it's something the German government would probably not be able to avoid. One option in Germany? Radically slashing the benefits for the long-term unemployed by half would save 13 billion euros. That would be enough to reach the goal of 62 billion euros. But the need to save billions is not just theoretical in Germany. Public debt is now at some 1.7 trillion euros. And since the financial crisis began, additional expenditures have been added.
The bailout of the banks, for example, and all the financial support that's now being drawn on for the euro crisis. That could lead to more borrowing. But it's still not as high as in Greece right now.
And if it is someday, then at least we've identified a few places where money could be saved.
For more on the story, click onto handelsblatt.com, the website of Germany's leading financial daily, or go to our own site at dwworld.de. Well, Greeks have taken to the streets in recent weeks to protest against the government's drastic new austerity measures. Many feel they're being unfairly targeted for cutbacks. But the Greek government says it has no alternative if the country has to be pulled out from its debt crisis. Now, we want to know how you feel. Here's our question of the week. Do you sympathize with Greece? Tell us. Just go to our website at dwworld.de/English/Made in Germany. Fill out our online questionnaire and you'll automatically qualify for our next draw, which is coming up soon. The prize is this DVD, German Family Business. And as always, we look forward to hearing from you. Now, last week, we asked you, does the world need an expo? Rami Selim from Egypt has a very logical take on this question. He writes, more than 190 countries and more than 50 international organizations have registered to participate in the Shanghai World Expo. That means that, yes, the world needs an expo. Well, your answer convinced me, Rami. Thank you, and all our other viewers who wrote to us. Please keep it up. Well, and here's an example of how cost-cutting measures and being at the right place at the right time can eventually pay off. Europe's biggest mail and express delivery company, Deutsche Post, DHL, has delivered an upbeat outlook for 2010 this week. In the first quarter of 2010, its sales volume went up by 4.4% to 12 billion euros compared to the same period last year, largely due to restructuring and improved shipping volumes in Asia. So we go to Singapore. Some 1,200 German companies are present there, taking advantage of the good economic climate in one of Asia's major trading hubs.
It's just after sunrise at Singapore International Airport, and workers at the DHL Package Center are starting their daily battle against time. A jumbo jet from Hong Kong has just landed. Ground crews are unloading the 80 tons of freight on board. They need to sort and empty dozens of containers. About 4,000 packages and express mail envelopes have to be delivered to offices and homes before noon. It's a logistical challenge, and it's Brad Harris's job to make sure it happens.
And we need it to the customer as soon as possible. You know, they require the documents for their board meetings or spare parts for their factories and their manufacturing. So our real challenge is trying to get it to them as early as possible. And this freight has been picked up all around Asia 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon on the previous day. So we're doing all this within about a 14, 15-hour turnaround time period.
The Singapore Package Center handles all DHL packages coming from or going to Southeast Asia. Last year, that was more than 11 million items. Packages are registered at every handling station, which enables the customer to precisely track their location. The boss at DHL's center in Singapore is John Pearson. He's worked for the logistics company for more than 20 years. Pearson directs DHL operations in the entire Asia-Pacific region, which is the company's most important growth market worldwide. Trade with Europe has been declining.
That's absolutely important that we've got the best intra-regional transit times and service levels. Several countries have the high proportion of the kilos they move are moving intra-Asia, from China to India or from China to Thailand. So Asia is absolutely where it's at for the years to come, certainly.
DHL operates about 350 flights a day just in the Asia-Pacific region. A control center monitors all those movements. Dispatchers must be prepared to react immediately to any disruptions in international air traffic. Disruptions like the clouds of volcanic ash that have been interfering with flights in Europe.
They're very impressed with this system overall because
time is what they're really buying, but the blend of time and reliability is perhaps even more important. But for some customers, it's everything, that it's there right to the minute that they were expecting it to be there. So, yeah, we would never underestimate the importance of time.
Today, everything's going smoothly. DHL's fleet of delivery trucks leave the airport on time to begin their rounds in the various parts of the city. Singapore is one of the world's most important logistics hubs. Ships and airplanes from here depart for more than 200 countries around the world. A major center of finance and commerce, Singapore has quickly recovered from the economic crisis. In the first quarter of 2010, its economy grew by more than 13%. And the boom isn't just limited to the island state.
China, India and Korea are leading that recovery. They were certainly the first out of it towards the back end of last year, and they're performing very strongly indeed now.
That means business for shipping and air freight has also recovered and is now growing just as fast as it was before the crisis. DHL in Singapore recently opened a new service center just for customers in the oil and gas industry. It provides specialized solutions for the transport of large and expensive machinery and equipment. More than 200 experts here work exclusively on contracts from the energy resources industry, a multi-billion euro market.
As recent as 2 weeks ago, a major oil company in Singapore had built up a petrochemical complex with an investment of $3 billion. That speaks volume on the size of the industry that we are looking at.
The recovery of Asia's developing economies is good news for the German logistics company, as well as for the city-state of Singapore.
Well, from a European perspective, Asia's success is quite amazing. So let's go back to our studio guest, Monika Stärk, Executive Director of the German Asia-Pacific Business Association. Well, after a recession in 2009, Singapore is now posting double-digit growth again, while we here in Europe, we're happy to get back on track in any way. Is there anything we're doing wrong?
No, one should not forget that Singapore, of course, is a highly developed economy, but that most Asian economies come from a much lower level. So it's normal that they have higher growth rates. And on the other hand, we shouldn't envy them. We should be happy that they are growing because we are benefiting from that.
We participate because we can export more goods to the Asian region now. But how sustainable is their growth right now?
I think that growth is much more sustainable than we would have thought a couple of months ago. Of course, there is a dependency on stimulus programs of the respective governments, especially from the Chinese side. But I'm quite confident that the Asian governments will manage to get a sustainable domestic-led growth.
So even once the stimulus packages there run out, a lot of industries have improved in Asia. Which ones, for example, are performing best?
Well, I think Asia has gained in competitiveness in a number of sectors. We are talking very much about e-mobility these days, but we see as well progress in industries like machinery and equipment. And this is a development we have to look at quite closely, but this as well is a development which shouldn't frighten us. We should see this as an invitation to enter into competition and to make sure that this is a fair competition.
Talking of competition, of course, we compete with China when it comes to exports. China has now overtaken Germany as world export champion. Which parts of industry suffered the most there?
Suffered from the fact that China is number one, but no industry in Germany really suffers from the fact that China is the world's leading exporter. German exports are still growing, despite the difficult situation we have seen last year. And this is the important fact, that our exports are developing well, and not that we have higher export share than China has. This is really a dangerous way of thinking.
Just briefly, so far for a long time, German companies have mainly focused their business activities on China. Which other nations in the Asian region should we focus now?
Well, we have, of course, very interesting developments in India with that huge domestic market, but we have as well interesting developments in the Southeast Asian countries, which don't have that tremendous growth rates, but with some 600 million people are very interesting markets for German companies.
There's still a lot to explore. Monika Stärk, thank you very much for joining us.